Victoria Cross snatched the mop from Jack Harrison's hands. The crack echoed across the 38th floor as she broke the wooden handle over her knee. Splinters scattered across polished granite. 300 employees watched from the conference hall's glass walls, their phones raised, recording. Her breath touched his face when she leaned close, each word precise as a scalpel cut. "You think you can fix my $3 million engine? You can't even hold a mop without my permission." She threw the broken pieces at his feet. Jack didn't move, didn't flinch. His hands stayed at his sides while Victoria's smile sharpened into something predatory. 2 hours. Fix what MIT couldn't fix in 8 weeks. In front of everyone. In front of my investors. In front of the whole goddamn world. Her fingers snapped inches from his eyes. "When you fail, and you will fail, I'll destroy you. Not just fire you. Destroy you completely. Your name will be poison in every engine shop from here to Detroit." Jack looked down at the splintered wood. Then he looked at Victoria Cross, CEO of Crosstech Industries, the woman who'd made 3 years of his life invisible. "Start the clock." The words came out quiet, certain, final. Victoria's confidence flickered. She'd expected begging, tears, a man crumbling under pressure he couldn't possibly handle. Not this calm defiance that made the air shift, made 300 people lean forward, made something impossible suddenly feel inevitable. 60 seconds earlier, Jack Harrison had been invisible. That was the deal he'd made with himself 3 years ago when Emma died and the world stopped making sense. Stay quiet, stay small, stay alive, cash the paycheck, pay the bills, don't make waves. Invisibility was survival, the only kind that didn't cost more than he had left to give. But Victoria Cross had just changed the rules. Jack pushed his maintenance cart down the executive hallway, wheels squeaking against concrete. 11:15 at night. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off floors he'd mopped an hour ago. His maintenance uniform, navy blue with a Crosstech patch over the breast pocket, hung loose on a frame that had lost 15 pounds since Emma's funeral. The cart carried cleaning supplies, trash bags, and a worn notebook he kept hidden under the chemical bottles. 3 years. 3 years of being the man people looked through instead of at. The security guard who nodded without seeing his face. The executives who held elevator doors for his cart but never acknowledged the person pushing it. The engineers who discussed classified projects in the hallways while Jack emptied their trash cans. As if custodial work rendered him deaf, mute, invisible to consequence. He'd learned the geography of insignificance. Knew which corners to turn before someone approached. Which bathrooms to clean during which meetings. How to make his footsteps so quiet that people forgot he was there. Standing 3 feet away while they argued about budgets, or whispered about affairs, or complained about the CEO who terrorized them all. Victoria Cross, the name carried weight in Silicon Valley, in defense circles, in the kind of boardrooms where $100 million contracts were signed with fountain pens that cost more than Jack's annual salary. She'd built Crosstech from nothing, they said, fought her way up through an industry that didn't want women, especially not women who refused to smile and apologize and make themselves smaller for male comfort. Jack understood that fight. His mother had been a secretary at Ford for 32 years, watching men with half her competence climb past her because they wore the right suits and played the right golf courses. She taught him early, the world doesn't reward merit. It rewards compliance with whatever image people expect. But somewhere between fighting for respect and fighting for domination. Victoria had crossed a line Jack couldn't forgive. She didn't just demand excellence. She weaponized humiliation, made examples of people. Last month, she'd fired a junior engineer in the middle of the cafeteria, loud enough for everyone to hear about his incompetence, his failures, his worthlessness. The man had been 42 years old. He'd cried. Jack kept pushing his cart. His right knee ached, an old injury from his shop days, from the time a hydraulic lift failed and dropped an engine block that should have crushed his leg but only shattered his kneecap. That was 15 years ago, back when he still had health insurance good enough to cover the surgery. Now he just lived with the pain that flared up in cold weather and after long shifts on concrete floors. The apartment waiting for him was a one-bedroom unit in a 3-story building 20 minutes outside Detroit proper. $850 a month, which consumed a third of his custodial salary. The furniture was secondhand. The refrigerator held milk, eggs, bread, and the kind of cheap coffee that tasted like punishment. On the shelf by the window sat a photograph. Jack and Emma on their wedding day, both of them 25 and stupid with hope. Mahawam, Emma Harrison, dead 3 years at 48. The cancer had come fast and vicious, pancreatic, the kind that didn't care about treatment plans or prayer or how much of your life you were willing to sacrifice to buy her one more month. Jack had sold everything. The shop he'd spent 15 years building, Harrison's Engine Works, gone for $210,000 when it was worth $380,000. The house they'd bought together, liquidated to cover medical bills insurance refused to pay. $290,000 in debt. $180,000 recovered from selling their life piece by piece. The remaining $110,000 hung over him like smoke. Collection agencies called twice a week. He'd stopped answering. What could they take that hadn't already been taken? Emma's last words played on repeat in the quiet hours before dawn. Her hand in his, thin as paper, cold as winter settling in. Promise me you won't give up. He'd promised. Promise me you'll remember who you are. He'd promised that too. Promise me you'll find your way back. That promise hurt the most because Jack didn't know if he could keep it. How do you find your way back when the path only leads to empty apartments and midnight shifts and the ghost of who you used to be? Jack Harrison at 33 had been the owner of a respected repair shop in Detroit, the guy who could diagnose engine problems other mechanics missed. The man his father would have been proud of if his father had lived long enough to see it. Robert Harrison, 34 years at Ford Motor Company, started on the line at 22, retired at 56 without ever moving up. He could hear engine problems the way other people heard music. A missed beat here, a wrong note there. The subtle discordance that meant something was failing before anyone else noticed. Jack's earliest memory was his father's garage, age 5, watching Robert rebuild a Chevy small block engine while explaining each component. By 8, Jack could identify parts by touch. By 12, he understood compression ratios and valve timing. By 16, he was helping diagnose problems in neighbors' cars, learning that engines were just puzzles if you knew how to listen. Robert had taught him that every engine has a heartbeat, son. Most people hear noise. But if you listen, really listen, the engine will tell you exactly what's wrong. His father never got promoted at Ford, never got recognition. The engineers with college degrees took credit for solutions Robert provided while working the line. Management passed him over for supervisory positions because he didn't have the right credentials, just 34 years of practical knowledge that made their operations run smoothly. Jack was 19 when he found his father dead on the garage floor. Heart attack. 58 years old. He'd been working on a neighbor's Mustang, trying to isolate a timing chain rattle. His hands were still covered in grease. The engine sat half disassembled, never to be finished. The funeral was small. Ford sent a standard condolence letter. His supervisor didn't attend. The company that had consumed 34 years of Robert Harrison's life moved on within a week, replacing him with a younger worker at a lower wage. Jack swore he'd be different. He'd build something that mattered, something with his name on it, something that proved his father's knowledge hadn't died with him on that garage floor. Harrison's Engine Works opened when Jack was 28. Small shop, 4 bays, 1 full-time mechanic besides Jack. He specialized in diagnostics other shops couldn't crack. Built a reputation for solving problems others gave up on. The work was good, the money was decent. Emma handled the books while teaching elementary school during the day. They had plans, bigger shop, more employees, maybe franchise the diagnostic approach, maybe teach other mechanics how to listen the way Jack had learned to listen. Then Emma started losing weight. Then came the diagnosis. Then came the 8 months that erased everything Jack had built. The bankruptcy filing was 3 years old now. The records showed Harrison's Engine Works had assets of $210,000 and debts of $290,000. The court had liquidated everything, equipment sold at auction, tools scattered to a dozen different buyers. The building lease terminated. The name Harrison's Engine Works disappeared from the Detroit Business Registry. Jack Harrison, master mechanic, became Jack Harrison, custodial worker. Night shift, $10 an hour, no benefits, no recognition, no visibility. Invisibility was safer anyway. easier, less painful than hoping for something better and watching it die the way everything else had died. His cart stopped outside the R&D lab on the 38th floor. Through the glass walls, Jack could see the marine engine that had consumed Crosstech's engineering team for 2 months. A custom unit worth $3.5 million, designed for a Japanese manufacturing contract worth 10 times that. It sat on a test platform, cables and sensors attached like life support to a patient that wouldn't stabilize. Jack had been listening to this engine for 2 weeks. He wasn't supposed to notice it. Wasn't supposed to stop and pay attention when the engineers ran late-night tests. Wasn't supposed to care about the frustrated conversations he overheard while emptying trash cans and wiping down whiteboards covered in equations he shouldn't understand but did. But every night when Jack mopped the floor outside the R&D lab, he heard it. The stutter at 2400 RPM. The slight hesitation every 3 seconds. Barely perceptible. The kind of thing most people would dismiss as normal operation. Jack heard it the way his father had taught him to hear. And he knew exactly what was wrong. The first night he'd noticed, he almost said something. Almost knocked on the door and offered to help. But that would mean admitting he understood diagnostic engineering. Would mean explaining how a custodian knew about metric to imperial conversion errors and fuel injection timing and the cascade failures that occurred when systems designed in Stuttgart tried to interface with control units calibrated in Detroit. So he stayed quiet, kept mopping, listened to the engine struggle while engineers with MIT degrees scratched their heads and ran the same test that had failed 47 times before. Jack reached into his cart and pulled out the notebook. His father's notebook. Actually, one of 3 Robert had filled with engine notes over the years. Jack had been using it to document the marine engine's problems. Sketches, calculations, the complete solution to a puzzle Crosstech couldn't solve. He flipped through pages of his own handwriting, small and precise, filling margins around his father's 40-year-old observations about Ford assembly line issues. Jack had calculated the exact percentage of calibration error, had identified which subsystems were amplifying the problem, had even sourced the $60 adapter that would fix everything. But saying something meant becoming visible, meant risking the anger of men who'd spent 8 weeks failing publicly, meant stepping into the light and hoping it didn't burn him the way it had burned his father. So Jack kept quiet, kept mopping, kept listening to an engine die slowly, while 300 people who earned 10 times his salary pretended the problem would solve itself. He was turning his cart toward the service elevator when Victoria's voice cut through the silence. "I asked you a question, janitor." Jack's hands tightened on the cart handle. His first instinct was correct. Apologize and disappear. That was the survival strategy, the safe play. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll move to another floor." Her heels clicked against concrete as she approached. "No, stay. I want to know why security keeps reporting that you spend extra time near my workshop, that you stop outside the door and listen." Jack felt his chest tighten. 3 years of careful invisibility, destroyed by curiosity and an engine that wouldn't stop calling to him. "I wasn't." Victoria stopped 3 feet away, her presence filling the hallway like a physical force. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Jack's monthly salary. Her dark hair was pulled back, severe enough to hurt. Her eyes were the kind of cold that came from years of fighting battles where mercy meant defeat. "Don't lie to me. I own this building. I own every camera in this building. I've watched you, Jack Harrison, every night for 2 weeks standing outside that door like some kind of creep." Eric Chen appeared behind her. Lead engineer, MIT graduate, the kind of man who'd never pushed a mop in his life. He looked uncomfortable, sympathetic even, but too weak to intervene. "Victoria, maybe we should..." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Shut up, Eric." She never took her eyes off Jack. The security cameras would show this moment. Tomorrow, everyone would know the custodian who'd overstepped, who'd gotten too curious, who'd been made an example of the way Victoria made examples of everyone who forgot their place. Jack swallowed against the weight of 3 years' silence. His father's voice echoed in memory. "Some battles you walk away from. Some battles walk toward you." This battle had found him. The question was whether he had anything left worth fighting for. The words came out before he could stop them. "The engine. I can hear what's wrong with it." Victoria blinked once, twice, processing information that didn't fit her understanding of the world. What? The marine engine. The one your team's been working on for 8 weeks. I can hear the problem. Every night when I clean this floor, I hear it struggling, fighting itself. Silence stretched between them like a rope pulled too tight. Then Victoria laughed. Not polite, not nervous. A cruel sound that echoed through the empty hallway and made Eric Chen look at the floor. You can hear it. She wiped her eyes with theatrical exaggeration. Oh, this is precious. This is absolutely precious. She pulled out her phone. Eric, wake everyone up. Board members, engineers, the Japanese investors at the Ritz, everyone. I want them here in 1 hour. Eric's face went pale. Victoria, it's 11 at night. Her smile turned predatory. I don't care if it's 3 in the goddamn morning. Our janitor thinks he's an engineer. I want the whole world to watch what happens next. Jack's internal monologue screamed at him. This was the moment to backtrack, to apologize, to retreat into invisibility and hope she forgot about him in a week. But Emma's voice was louder. Remember who you are. He was the son of Robert Harrison, who'd solved problems Ford's engineers couldn't crack. He was the owner of Harrison's Engine Works, who'd built a reputation on hearing what others missed. He was the man who'd promised his dying wife he'd find his way back. Maybe this was the way back. Maybe it led straight off a cliff. But standing in this hallway with Victoria Cross staring him down like prey, Jack realized he was tired of being invisible. Tired of pretending he didn't hear the engines calling. Tired of living like a ghost in his own life. If Victoria wanted a show, he'd give her one. And when she tried to destroy him afterward, because she would try, that was certain, at least he'd know he'd stood up. At least he'd know he'd tried. The conference hall filled within 40 minutes. 300 employees, most in pajamas under winter coats, rubbing sleep from their eyes. They sensed blood in the water. Sensed the kind of spectacle Victoria Cross orchestrated when she wanted to remind everyone who held power. Jack stood at the front of the room holding a broken mop handle, feeling the weight of 300 stares. The marketing team had started a live stream, cameras recorded from 3 angles. Within minutes, the hashtag #CrossTechChallenge was trending as people tuned in to watch a janitor humiliate himself. The Japanese delegation arrived in black sedans. Hiroshi Tanaka stepped out first. 71 years old, $4 billion, and the patience of a man who'd been lied to for 8 weeks about engine problems that should have been solved in 8 days. He sat front row, face revealing nothing. Next to him sat Dr. Susan Park, 60 years old, former Boeing engineer, 53 patents, the woman who'd designed guidance systems for spacecraft and power plants for submarines. When Dr. Park watched you work, you were either being recruited or executed. There was no middle ground. Victoria took the stage like a ringmaster introducing the main event. Her voice carried that particular tone of someone who'd already won and was simply enjoying the victory parade. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the hour, but tonight we're going to witness something special. She gestured toward Jack with theatrical flourish. This is Jack Harrison. For 3 years, he's cleaned our toilets and emptied our trash cans. Tonight, he informed me that he, a janitor with no degree, no credentials, no qualifications whatsoever, can repair the engine that our MIT and Harvard engineers couldn't fix in 8 weeks. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jack watched Victoria work the room, building to her crescendo. She was good at this, had probably practiced in the mirror. She walked toward Jack slowly, deliberately, a predator circling wounded prey. So I'm giving him a chance. 2 hours in front of all of you, in front of Mr. Tanaka, whose patience we've tested far too long, in front of the entire world watching online. She stopped inches from his face, close enough that Jack could smell her perfume, something expensive that probably had a French name he wouldn't recognize. Fix the engine, janitor. Fix it and I'll make you workshop manager. 6-figure salary, benefits, everything you have never earned. Her voice dropped to a whisper that the microphone still caught. But when you fail, and we both know you'll fail, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure you never work with engines again. Not here, not anywhere. Not even changing oil at a Jiffy Lube in the middle of nowhere. She snapped her fingers inches from his eyes, the sound sharp enough to make half the room flinch. So what do you say, Mop Man? Ready to humiliate yourself in front of 100,000 people? Jack looked at the broken mop at his feet. 3 years ago, he'd held a different broken thing. Emma's hand, her pulse fading, her voice barely a whisper. Promise me you won't give up. Promise me you'll remember who you are. Promise me you'll find your way back. He'd kept the first two promises, hadn't given up, even when giving up would have been easier. Had remembered who he was, even when the world forgot. But he'd never found his way back. Not until now, not until this moment when Victoria Cross forced a choice between continued invisibility and a gamble that might destroy him. Jack met her eyes, saw the certainty there, the absolute conviction that he would fail, that a man who mopped floors couldn't possibly understand engineering at the level required to solve problems MIT graduates had missed. She'd underestimated him the way everyone had underestimated his father, the way the world underestimated anyone without the right credentials, the right background, the right pedigree. Start the clock. The words hit Victoria like a slap. Her smile flickered. She'd expected begging, excuses, maybe tears, the kind of collapse that would entertain her audience and reinforce her dominance. Not this, not quiet defiance from a man who should have been broken 3 years ago. Susan Park leaned forward in her seat. Something had shifted in the room. The custodian's voice carried no fear, no desperation, just calm certainty that made her think of old masters she'd trained under in Taiwan. Men who'd forgotten more about engineering than most people would ever learn. Victoria recovered quickly, professional Mac sliding back into place. Fine, Eric, start the timer. Make sure every camera captures what's about to happen. She turned to the crowd with theatrical flourish. Ladies and gentlemen, place your bets. How long before our janitor realizes he's in over his head? Nervous laughter from the employees. The Japanese delegation remained stone-faced. Jack walked toward the workshop door, his bad knee aching with each step. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the knowledge that everything, his job, his dignity, his last connection to who he used to be, rested on the next 2 hours. Behind him, Victoria's voice carried across the conference hall. This is going to be the most entertaining 2 hours of my career. The workshop smelled like oil and failure. The marine engine dominated the room. $3.5 million of German precision and American ambition. 8 weeks of broken promises. Chrome and steel catching the overhead lights, while 300 people pressed against glass walls to watch. Jack approached slowly, placed both hands flat against the engine block, closed his eyes. His father had taught him this. Robert Harrison, 34 years at Ford, the man who could diagnose any engine by sound alone. Every machine has a heartbeat, Tommy. Most people hear noise. But if you listen, really listen, the engine will tell you exactly what's wrong. Jack listened, felt the vibration through his palms, the subtle wrongness that everyone else had missed because they were looking at screens instead of feeling the machine, because they trusted instruments more than instinct, because they'd never been taught to hear the way Robert Harrison had taught his son to hear. There, the stutter at 2400 RPM, the hesitation every 3 seconds, the cascade of micro-failures propagating through 47 interconnected systems. There, Jack spoke suddenly, eyes still closed. The crowd fell silent. There what? Eric demanded from his diagnostic station. 2400 RPM every 3 seconds. You hear that stutter? Eric checked his monitors. The readings show normal operation. Jack opened his eyes. Your readings are wrong. That's part of the problem. The diagnostic software is calibrated for American standards. But this engine was built in Stuttgart, German engineering. Metric precision. Your instruments are looking for the wrong symptoms. Victoria laughed, a sharp sound designed to cut. A janitor telling MIT engineers their instruments are wrong. This is priceless. But Jack was already pulling out his notebook, his father's notebook, filled with calculations and diagrams from 2 weeks of midnight observations. The fuel injection system, German, calibrated to bar units, precision to hundredths of a millimeter. But your control unit is American. It reads PSI, expects looser tolerances. He showed them the math, his handwriting cramped but precise in the margins around his father's 40-year-old notes. The fuel rail pressure sensor reads 3.5 bar. Your software converts that to 50.76 psi, but rounds to 50.8. That's a 0.07% error, insignificant by itself, but this engine has 47 interconnected systems. Each one compounds the error. By the time signals reach the main computer, you've got cascading failures. Dr. Susan Parks stood up. The movement drew every eye in the room. How long before thermal overload? Jack met her gaze. Something passed between them. Recognition of shared language, shared understanding. 12 minutes, maybe 11. The accumulated errors create a feedback loop the cooling system can't handle. The engine shuts itself down to prevent damage. That's exactly what's been happening, Eric admitted, voice reluctant. 11 minutes, 47 seconds. Every single time. Victoria's smile tightened at the edges. Her control of the narrative was slipping. The custodian wasn't fumbling, wasn't lost, was speaking with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was talking about. She tried to regain ground. So you've identified the problem. Congratulations. But any idiot can point at something and say it's broken. Can you actually fix it? Jack reached into the diagnostic kit, pulled out a component, brushed aluminum, size of a hockey puck. This, Victoria stared. That's a $50 part. $58. It's a metric to imperial bridge adapter. Instead of reprogramming the entire control system or replacing German components with American ones, we add a translator. The adapter converts metric output into readings the American software can process accurately. The implications hit the room like a wave. Victoria's voice rose, losing its careful control. You're telling me that a $58 part could have solved a problem that's cost this company $3 million? Jack's response was simple, direct, the kind of truth that cut through engineering degrees and corporate hierarchies and every assumption people made about who could solve problems. Complicated problems don't always need complicated answers. Sometimes you just need to help two systems understand each other. My father used to say that. He began working on the engine. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just the muscle memory of 10,000 repairs, 10,000 diagnoses, 10,000 problems solved in Detroit garages and his own shop and 100 places that had never appreciated what they were witnessing. The installation took 14 minutes. Jack's hands moved with practiced precision through steps he'd mapped out in his notebook over 2 weeks of observation. Remove the problematic sensor housing. Install the adapter, recalibrate the connection points, test the signal flow. When he stepped back, his hands were steady, his breathing was calm, but inside his heart pounded like war drums. This was it. 3 years of invisibility leading to this moment. Emma's promise, his father's legacy. Everything compressed into the next few minutes while an engine either ran or failed. Ready for testing? The workshop fell silent. 300 people holding their breath, cameras recording, live stream viewers hitting 120,000 and climbing. Victoria checked the clock on the wall. 63 minutes remaining. You're cutting it close, Janitor. Jack nodded to Eric. Start it. Eric looked at Victoria, who waved impatiently. His hand moved to the ignition. The engine roared to life. Jack closed his eyes, listened with his father's ears. With 3 decades of training that no classroom could teach, the stutter was gone. The desperate fighting rhythm that had plagued the machine for 8 weeks had been replaced by something smooth, harmonious, the sound of a heart finally beating correctly. Diagnostic screens flickered. Red warnings disappeared one by one, replaced by green indicators that made the engineering team gasp audibly. Temperature stable, Eric reported, voice shaking. Pressure optimal. Fuel mixture perfect. The clock ticked. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. The engine purred like a satisfied predator. 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes. Victoria's confidence began cracking. Her smile became rigid, forced. The mask she wore for the world showing stress fractures. 11 minutes. The room held its collective breath. This was the moment every previous test had ended. The thermal overload, the emergency shutdown, the failure that had consumed 8 weeks in $3 million. 11 minutes, 30 seconds. Someone in the crowd whimpered. The tension had become physical, pressing against glass walls and compressed lungs. 11 minutes, 45 seconds. Victoria grabbed the edge of a table. Her knuckles went white. 11 minutes, 50 seconds. 11 minutes, 55 seconds. 11 minutes, 58 seconds. 11 minutes, 59 seconds. 12 minutes. The engine kept running in 12 minutes, 15 seconds. 12 minutes, 30 seconds. 13 minutes. The room exploded. Engineers shouted at each other. Employees cheered. Someone started crying. The live stream comments scrolled so fast they became a blur of exclamation points in disbelief and questions about how a janitor had just solved what MIT couldn't. But Jack Harrison didn't celebrate. He stood beside the engine, one hand resting on its warm surface, feeling the steady heartbeat of a machine that had finally found its voice. After 3 years of silence, after 3 years of invisibility, after 3 years of pretending he wasn't the man his father had trained him to be, Jack had spoken, and the world had listened. Hiroshi Tanaka rose from his chair. 71 years old, $4 billion, a lifetime of watching men succeed and fail. He began to clap, slow at first, deliberate, then faster. The room joined him, 300 people applauding a janitor who'd just done the impossible, who'd proved that credentials weren't knowledge, that degrees weren't wisdom, that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the person who sees most clearly. Dr. Susan Park walked through the crowd toward Jack. The applause quieted as people sensed something important about to happen. She stopped in front of him, studied his face with eyes that had evaluated engineers for 4 decades. "Where did you train?" "My father's garage. Detroit, 1981. "No formal education?" "Community college. 2 years. Couldn't afford to finish." Dr. Park nodded slowly, recognition settling into her expression. "Your father was Robert Harrison, Ford Motor Company, 34 years. Jack's heart stopped. "How do you know that?" "Because I was a young engineer in 1989 when a team from Boeing consulted with Ford on a joint project. We had a problem that stumped everyone. Guidance system interference with a new engine design. Your father solved it in 3 hours. She paused, letting the weight of history settle. He should have been running that company. Instead, they never even learned his name. Jack felt his throat tighten. His father had never told him that story, had never mentioned Boeing or guidance systems or being the smartest person in a room that refused to see him. He never told me. He wouldn't have. Men like your father don't boast. They just do the work and hope someone notices. Dr. Park extended her hand. Someone noticed, Jack. 40 years too late for your father, but not too late for you. Behind them, Victoria Cross slipped quietly toward the exit. The hunter had become prey. The woman who terrorized 300 employees for years was attempting escape while their attention focused elsewhere. She didn't make it. Mrs. Cross, Hiroshi Tanaka's voice stopped her cold. We need to discuss the terms of our continued partnership. Victoria turned, professional mask struggling to reassemble itself. Of course, Mr. Tanaka. I'll have my assistant schedule. Now. The word carried the weight of $75 million. We discuss now. The crowd parted as Tanaka walked toward Victoria. His translator hurried to keep pace. For 8 weeks, your company has failed to deliver what you promised. Tonight, a janitor succeeded where your experts failed. This raises questions about leadership, about judgment, about whether Cross-Tech Industries deserves our investment. Victoria's face went pale beneath carefully applied makeup. Mr. Tanaka, I can explain, you will explain to your board, to your shareholders, to everyone who watched tonight's performance. He glanced at Jack. But first, you will apologize. Apologize to Mr. Harrison, publicly. Now. The room fell silent. Victoria Cross, CEO, owner, queen of everything she surveyed, looked at Jack Harrison, the janitor she'd mocked, the invisible man she'd tried to destroy, the master mechanic who'd just saved her company. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands trembled at her sides. Every camera in the room captured this moment. The live stream viewers had hit 200,000. This would be replayed, analyzed, remembered. She whispered, "I'm sorry." "Louder," Tanaka said. "The cameras are recording." Victoria closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had broken behind the cold exterior. Not remorse, not yet, but the first crack in armor she'd spent 30 years forging. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harwise. I was wrong about you." Jack looked at her for a long moment, thought about Emma's final words, about promises made to dying wives, about finding your way back when the path seemed impossible. "Apology accepted," he said quietly. "Now let's talk about how we're going to make this engine even better." The workshop clock read 12:47 a.m., 63 minutes ahead of schedule. Jack Harrison, janitor, had just become Jack Harrison, the man who heard engines speak. The crowd began dispersing. Engineering teams gathered around diagnostic stations, reviewing data, trying to understand how they'd missed something so obvious. Executives pulled out phones to brief board members who'd wake up to news their company had been saved by custodial staff. Jack stood alone by the engine, one hand still resting on its surface. The vibration against his palm felt like a heartbeat. Steady, strong. The way things were supposed to feel when they worked correctly, when all the parts aligned and the systems understood each other and the machine could finally do what it was designed to do. "Mr. Harrison," DePark touched his shoulder, "you should sit down. You're shaking." Jack looked at his hands. She was right. The adrenaline that had carried him through the past 2 hours was draining away, leaving behind exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You just did something impossible under impossible pressure. Your body is in shock." She guided him toward a chair. "Sit. Breathe. The engine isn't going anywhere." Jack sat. Around him the workshop buzzed with activity. People who'd ignored him for 3 years now stared with mixture of awe and confusion. The invisible man had become visible, and they didn't know how to process the transformation. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. 2:43 a.m. He should have known better than to answer, should have recognized that Victoria Cross wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. That powerful people don't lose. They just choose when to stop playing. But exhaustion made Jack careless. He answered. "Mr. Harrison," female voice, professional, unfamiliar. "Please hold for Victoria Cross." His stomach dropped. A click. Then Victoria's voice, cold and controlled, stripped of the false warmth she'd performed for cameras. "Hello, Jack. Mrs. Cross. I wanted to call and congratulate you personally. Quite a performance tonight." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Pause. Calculated. "I've been doing some research since I left the workshop. Fascinating things come up when you know where to look." Jack said nothing, waited for the knife he knew was coming. "For instance, I found an interesting bankruptcy filing from 3 years ago. Harrison's Engine Works. Liquidated assets totaling $210,000. Debts totaling $290,000. Her voice dripped, false sympathy from medical bills mostly, your wife, cancer. Jack gripped the phone tighter. "That's none of your business." "Everything about my employees is my business, Jack. Especially employees who humiliate me in front of investors worth $75 million. The false sympathy vanished, replaced by ice. "I also found some interesting records from your time at Harrison's Engine Works. Customer complaints, safety violations, a lawsuit that was settled out of court. That lawsuit was fraudulent. The customer, I don't care what it was. I care what it looks like. And it looks like Jack Harrison, genius janitor, has a history of running a problematic business into the ground." She let that sink in. "How do you think that story will play in the media? Disgraced former mechanic tricks investors with lucky fix. I can see the headlines now." Jack forced himself to breathe, to think. Victoria had spent 3 hours researching his past, had found ammunition, was preparing to destroy him the only way people like her knew how, by rewriting the narrative until his victory became evidence of fraud. "What do you want?" "I want you to resign tomorrow morning before Tanaka has a chance to make any decisions about the partnership. You'll write a letter admitting you got lucky tonight, that you're not qualified for any engineering position, that you're grateful for the opportunity to return to your maintenance duties. Victoria paused. And if you refuse, then I destroy you. Not just fire you, destroy you. I'll make sure every media outlet in the country knows about your failed business, your dead wife, your pathetic attempts to relive past glory. I'll sue you for unauthorized access to proprietary equipment. I'll have my lawyers drag you through court until you can't afford to eat. Her voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost human, the cruelty more cutting for its softness. You think tonight was a victory, Jack, but you forgot the most important rule of corporate America. People like me don't lose. We just choose when to stop playing. The line went dead. Jack sat in the darkness of his apartment, phone still pressed to his ear, Victoria's threat echoing in the silence. The photograph of Emma smiled at him from the shelf, frozen in a moment when the future still held promise. He'd kept his promises to her, hadn't given up, had remembered who he was, had finally found his way back. And now Victoria Cross was going to take it all away, unless he fought back, unless he refused to disappear again, unless he remembered that invisibility might be survival, but it was also a kind of death. Jack looked at Emma's photograph one more time, heard her voice as clearly as if she were sitting beside him. Some things matter more than safety, oh Tommy. Some things are worth the risk. Victoria Cross thought she was the predator, thought she could threaten and manipulate and control because that's what powerful people did. That's what had always worked. She was about to learn what it felt like to be prey. Jack didn't sleep. Morning light crept through his apartment blinds while he sat at the kitchen table with his father's notebook open, surrounded by 3 years of careful invisibility that Victoria Cross was about to weaponize. The bankruptcy records she'd mentioned were public. The lawsuit, fraudulent as it was, had left paper trails. A customer who'd blamed Jack for engine problems caused by his own negligence, then sued for damages when Jack refused to fix them for free, settled out of court because fighting would have cost more than paying. Victoria would twist it, make it evidence of incompetence, feed it to journalists who'd write headlines about janitors playing engineer. By noon, Jack's moment of triumph would become a cautionary tale about overreach and delusion, unless he moved first. His phone showed 6:15 a.m. Hiroshi Tanaka's assistant had sent a text at 5:30. Mr. Tanaka requests private meeting, 7:30 a.m. Conference room B. Jack showered, put on the same clothes from yesterday. He owned 3 pairs of work pants, 4 shirts, all variations of the same practical uniform. His knee ached from standing on concrete for 2 hours while fixing the engine. The Civic's check engine light had been on for 3 months, ironic for a master mechanic who couldn't afford to fix his own vehicle. Crosstech's parking lot was empty at 7. Jackie's key card still worked. Victoria hadn't moved that fast. He rode the elevator to the 38th floor, watched the numbers climb, remembered every night he'd ridden this same elevator, pushing a maintenance cart while executives ignored his existence. Conference room B was smaller than the auditorium where he'd performed for 300 people. Intimate. 2 chairs facing each other across a table. Hiroshi Tanaka sat in one, hands folded, expression unreadable. Jack took the other chair, waited. His father had taught him silence could be its own form of communication. Hiroshi spoke first. She will try to destroy you. You know this. Yes, sir. And yet you challenged her anyway. In front of her employees, in front of her investors, in front of the entire world. Something that might have been a smile touched Hiroshi's weathered face. Either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. Hiroshi's laugh was unexpected, warm, genuine. The sound of a man who'd spent 71 years evaluating people and recognized honesty when he heard it. I like you, Mr. Harrison. I liked you before last night when I watched security footage of a janitor studying engine blueprints at 2 in the morning. I liked you more when I saw you stand up to a woman who terrifies half of Silicon Valley. He stood, walked to the window overlooking Detroit's industrial sprawl. The morning sun turned his silver hair to platinum. Tomorrow we will discuss your future. Today you should go home. Sleep. You've been awake 27 hours by my count. Jack started to rise. Hiroshi raised one hand, keeping him seated. One more thing. Your father, Robert Harrison. I knew of him. Time stopped. Jack's chest tightened around air that suddenly wouldn't move properly through his lungs. In 1985, I visited Ford's Detroit plant as a young executive, 39 years old, ambitious, building what would become Tanaka Industries. Hiroshi turned from the window, his eyes holding memories across 4 decades. There was a problem with an engine design, something that stumped our joint engineering team for weeks. Your father solved it in one afternoon. Jack found his voice, barely. He never mentioned that. He refused to take credit, told our team the solution was obvious if you listened to the engine. Hiroshi's expression softened with something like regret. I tried to hire him, offered 3 times his Ford salary to come to Japan, led our engine development program. He would have become wealthy, respected, given the recognition he deserved. The words hit Jack like physical blows. His father, Robert Harrison, offered a fortune and refused it. Why? He said his family was in Detroit, said he couldn't leave them. Hiroshi met Jack's eyes. Couldn't leave his son. The truth settled like weight on Jack's shoulders. All those years watching his father work thankless hours at Ford, all those nights assuming Robert Harrison had simply accepted his invisible fate. But he hadn't accepted it. He'd chosen it. Chosen Jack. Chosen family over fortune, recognition over reward, his son's presence over his own advancement. Jack felt tears threatening. Force them back. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Men like your father don't burden their children with sacrifices made. They simply make them and move forward. Hiroshi placed one hand on Jack's shoulder, the gesture carrying the weight of 2 men who'd both watched talent die unrecognized. He was a great man, your father. The world's failure to acknowledge him was tragedy, but perhaps his son will receive the recognition he deserved. Jack walked to his car in a daze, started the engine. It coughed, sputtered, finally caught. The check engine light glared its steady accusation. He should go home, should sleep, should follow Hiroshi's advice and let exhaustion have its due. Instead, he drove to the cemetery. Sarah Memorial Gardens sat on the eastern edge of Detroit's suburbs. Jack hadn't visited in 8 months. The guilt of that absence sat heavy as he walked between headstones reading names of people who'd also left behind unfinished business, unpaid debts, promises they'd run out of time to keep. Emma Harrison, beloved wife, 1907-2022. The words carved in granite didn't capture who she'd been, didn't mention her laugh or the way she'd organized their kitchen, so everything had its precise place, or how she believed in second chances even when the world proved that faith unwarranted. Jack knelt in grass that needed mowing. Someone had left flowers 2 headstones over, wilted carnations in a plastic vase. His hands were empty, except for the notebook, his father's notebook, the last physical connection to Robert Harrison, and now to Emma too, because she'd been the one who insisted they keep it after the funeral. I did it, Em, fixed the engine, made them see me. His voice felt strange in open air, too loud and too quiet simultaneously. But Victoria's coming for me. She's going to twist everything. Make me look like a fraud. A breeze moved through the cemetery, rustling leaves that had already begun their autumn surrender. Emma wasn't here to answer, had never believed in ghosts or afterlife or any comfort except the one that mattered, making the most of the time you had while you had it. Jack pressed his palm flat against the headstone, cold granite warming slowly in morning sun. I need help, and I think I know where to get it, but it means trusting someone, means risking everything on the chance that not everyone in that building is Victoria's puppet. He stood. His knee protested. The check engine light in his Civic would keep glowing. Bills would keep arriving. The world would keep turning, whether Jack Harrison fought back or surrendered. But Emma had believed in fighting, had fought cancer for 8 months when doctors gave her 3, had fought insurance companies who denied claims and hospitals who demanded payment in the universe itself that had decided 48 was old enough to die. If she'd fought that hard, Jack could fight Victoria Cross. He drove back to his apartment, looked up a number he'd been given 3 years ago. Eric Chen, lead engineer, the man who'd stood behind Victoria last night, looking uncomfortable but complicit, sympathetic but too weak to intervene when it mattered. 3 years ago, when Jack first started at Crosstech, Eric had given him a business card, said if Jack ever needed anything, he should call. It was the kind of gesture people made when they wanted to feel generous without risk of actual imposition. Most likely, Eric had forgotten entirely. Jack dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a sleep-thick voice answered. "Hello? Eric, Jack Harrison. I need help." Silence stretched long enough that Jack thought the call had dropped. Then Eric's voice came back, careful, calculating. "Victoria called you, didn't she?" "Yes, she threatened to destroy me." Eric exhaled heavily. The sound carried 3 years of exhaustion, of bending under pressure that never let up. "She does that. I've seen it happen a dozen times. Good engineers, smart people. She finds their weakness and exploits it until they break." "Is that what happened to you?" Another pause. When Eric spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, as if Victoria might somehow overhear through walls and distance. "I had a gambling problem. 3 years ago, lost almost everything. Retirement savings, my daughter's college fund, nearly lost my house." The confession came faster now, as if Eric had been holding it trapped for years. "Victoria found out. She paid off my debts, $230,000. Didn't ask for repayment. Just said I owed her loyalty, that I'd work 16-hour days and never push back on anything she decided and keep my mouth shut when I saw things that weren't right." Jack's chest tightened. This was why Eric had looked uncomfortable last night, why he'd started to object when Victoria attacked Jack, then fallen silent when she snapped at him. He wasn't weak. He was trapped. "That's why you work so hard, why you never stand up to her." "She owns me, Jack. Same way she'll own you if you let her." Bitterness crept into Eric's voice, sharp and corrosive. "Why do you think I'm telling you this? Because I want you to know what you are facing. Want you to understand that fighting Victoria Cross means fighting someone who has infinite resources and no conscience about using them." Jack looked around his apartment, the second-hand furniture, the empty refrigerator, the photograph of Emma smiling from a day when they'd both believed the future held promise. There has to be something she's hiding, something that could level the playing field. Eric was quiet so long Jack thought he'd hung up. Then carefully, as if testing the weight of words before releasing them, "There might be one thing. Tell me." "Victoria keeps files, private files, on her personal server in her office. Emails, financial records, project reports, the real ones, not the sanitized versions she shows the board." Eric's voice dropped even lower. "If someone could access that server, they'd find proof. Years of falsified data, hidden failures, government contracts with inflated success rates, enough to destroy her if it went public." Jack's mind raced ahead. How would someone access it? Her office, 38th floor, servers in a locked cabinet behind her desk. Password changes weekly, but she keeps a backup written in her day planner. Third drawer, left side. Eric hesitated. "You'd need to come early, 6:45, before security shift change. Use your maintenance key card. It still has access to executive offices. If you get caught, she'll press charges. Corporate espionage, industrial theft. You'll go to prison." Eric's warning carried the weight of someone who'd considered and rejected this same path. "But if you succeed, you'll have evidence that could save you. Maybe save all of us." Jack stared at his reflection in the darkened television screen. Saw a man who'd spent 3 years invisible, 3 years safe, 3 years dying slowly in maintenance uniform. Victoria's threat would come whether he fought back or surrendered. At least fighting meant going down with dignity instead of drowning in silence. "How do I access the server?" Eric gave him instructions, detailed, precise. The kind of specificity that came from someone who'd thought this through carefully, mapped every step, understood exactly what needed to happen. They talked for 17 minutes. When Eric hung up, Jack sat with his phone in hand, wondering if he'd just found an ally or walked into a trap his exhausted brain was too tired to recognize. 6:40 a.m. Jack parked 3 blocks from Crosstech and walked the rest of the distance. Early enough that most spaces sat empty, late enough that a few engineers' cars indicated overtime shifts or people who'd worked through the night. His maintenance uniform had been in the Civic's trunk. He'd put it on in a gas station bathroom, transformed back into the invisible man one final time. The building's lobby was empty. Security guard behind the desk glanced up, saw the uniform, waved him through without question. Jack's keycard beeped green at the elevator. He rode to 38 with his heart hammering against his ribs. Victoria's office sat at the corridor's end. Glass walls, currently frosted for privacy. The door required keycard access, but maintenance had universal clearance. How else would they clean executive spaces at night when everyone else had gone home? Jack swiped his card. The lock clicked. He pushed through, closed the door behind him, stood in Victoria Cross's personal domain for the first time in 3 years of working this building. The office smelled like her perfume, something expensive with sharp undertones. The desk dominated the space, polished mahogany that probably cost more than Jack's annual salary. Behind it, exactly where Eric had described, stood a locked cabinet. Jack moved fast. No time for hesitation or second thoughts. Third drawer, left side. The day planner sat exactly where Eric promised, leather-bound, Victoria's initials embossed in gold. He flipped through pages of meetings and appointments and notes written in precise handwriting that revealed someone who planned every hour, controlled every variable, never left anything to chance. There, last Monday's page, a string of numbers and letters in the margin, casual enough that someone glancing wouldn't recognize it as a password, but clear enough that Victoria could find it when needed. Jack memorized the sequence, replaced the planner, turned to the cabinet, entered the password. The lock clicked open. Inside, a small server hummed quietly, surrounded by external hard drives and backup systems. Everything Victoria wanted to keep hidden from the world, stored in a locked box, in a locked office, in a building she owned. Jack pulled the flash drive from his pocket. He'd bought it at a 24-hour convenience store for $12, his checking account now down to $83 until next week's paycheck that might never come. He plugged it into the server. The download dialog appeared. Estimated time, 7 minutes. Progress bar crept forward. 3%, 7%, 12%. Each percentage felt like an hour. Each second stretched into eternity while Jack stood exposed in Victoria's office, committing a crime that would send him to prison if discovered. Footsteps in the hallway. Jack froze. His blood turned to ice water in his veins. The footsteps grew louder, heels clicking against concrete with a rhythm he recognized from 3 years of avoiding it during his cleaning rounds. The door opened. Victoria Cross walked in. Time stopped. Victoria stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, staring at Jack with an expression that moved through surprise towards something colder, more calculated. Behind him, the computer showed 37%. The flash drive was visible. The open cabinet was visible. Jack's guilt was visible in every line of his body. Well, Victoria's voice carried that particular tone of someone who'd just won a game they'd been playing 3 moves ahead. This is unexpected. Jack's mind raced through impossible scenarios. Lie about why he was here, claim he'd come to clean, pretend the download was something innocent. Every option crumbled under the weight of obvious guilt. Victoria closed the door behind her. The lock clicked with the finality of a cell door. I came in early to prepare for my meeting with Mr. Tanaka, wanted to review some files, get my story straight. She walked toward him, each step measured, deliberate. Instead, I find you in my office, stealing from my private server. Jack found his voice. I'm not stealing. This is evidence. Evidence of what, exactly? Falsified reports, hidden failures, defense contracts you've been lying about for years. His hands clenched at his sides. Eric told me everything. Victoria's laugh was sharp enough to cut. Eric Chen told you about my private files? She shook her head, genuine amusement mixing with cruelty. Oh, Jack. Sweet, stupid Jack. The progress bar hit 44%. Victoria pulled out her phone, finger hovering over the screen. Eric Chen works for me, has worked for me ever since I paid off his gambling debts 3 years ago. The truth hit Jack like a physical blow. Eric's sympathetic voice on the phone, his detailed instructions, his warnings about getting caught, all of it performance, all of it trap. You don't think I know everything that happens in my company? Victoria's smile was arctic. Eric called me the moment you hung up, told me your whole plan. I've been waiting since 5 a.m. for you to walk through that door. 51%. Jack looked at the screen, then at Victoria. Understanding crashed through his exhaustion. She'd let him come, let him break in, let him plug the flash drive in and start downloading. Because she didn't need to stop him. She needed proof he'd committed a crime. You set me up. I gave you rope. You chose to hang yourself. Victoria pressed a button on her phone. Security is already on the way. Corporate espionage, industrial theft, unauthorized access to protected systems. My lawyers will make sure you spend the next 10 years in prison. Her finger moved toward the call button. Unless you'd like to discuss alternatives. Jack felt the weight of 3 years' survival instincts screaming at him to surrender. To beg. To take whatever deal Victoria offered because prison would destroy him worse than invisibility ever had. But somewhere underneath the fear, underneath the exhaustion, Emma's voice whispered, "Some things matter more than safety." His voice came out steady, surprising them both. "There's something you should understand about me, Mrs. Cross." Victoria's finger paused, interested despite herself. 3 years ago, I held my wife's hand while she died. 8 months of watching her waste away. 8 months of selling everything I'd built just to buy her a few more weeks. Jack took a step toward her, watching Victoria's confidence waver. After she was gone, I didn't care about anything, not my reputation, not my future, not my life. He pulled out his own phone, showed her the screen, displaying a text conversation with Hiroshi Tanaka's assistant. Meeting confirmed, 7:30 a.m. Subject, financial integrity concerns. You think you can threaten me with prison? Lady, I've already lost everything that mattered. There's nothing you can do to me worse than what I've already survived. The progress bar hit 78%. Victoria's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Jack. Her certainty was cracking. Professional mask showing stress fractures. Here's what's going to happen. Jack's voice carried 3 years of silence, finally breaking. You'll call security. Have me arrested. I'll tell them exactly what's on that server. Every falsified report, every hidden failure, every lie you've told to investors and government agencies. He gestured to his phone. And while you're explaining to police why your janitor was in your office, I'll be explaining to Hiroshi Tanaka why his $75 million investment is about to become front-page news. He's waiting for me right now, downstairs in the lobby. Victoria stared at the phone like it was a weapon pointed at her chest. Her mind was racing. Jack could see it in the micro-expressions flickering across her face. Calculating, searching for escape routes, finding them all blocked. You're insane. You're throwing away your life for nothing. No, I'm throwing away nothing for something. For the first time in 3 years, I'm fighting back. Jack met her eyes. Win or lose, that's worth everything I've got left. Silence filled the office. The server hummed. The progress bar climbed. 92%, 96%. Victoria's phone trembled in her hand. She tried one last time, voice losing its careful control. There has to be a deal, something you want. Money, position. I'll make you head of the entire engineering division. 7 figures, stock options. There's nothing you can give me that I want. Victoria's mask shattered completely. Her voice rose, carrying years of fights and sacrifices in battles won through sheer refusal to lose. You think you're better than me? I built this company from nothing. I fought every day against men who told me I couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't. I clawed my way to the top while people like you were content to push mops and complain about how unfair life is. Her hands shook. Tears threatened at the corners of eyes that had learned not to cry decades ago. I became exactly what they expected me to be. A bitch, a tyrant, someone they couldn't ignore or dismiss or steal from. And it worked. I'm standing in a corner office on the 38th floor of a building with my name on it. Where are you standing? The vulnerability lasted only seconds before she caught herself. Rebuilt the walls. But Jack had seen it. The woman underneath the armor. The one who'd started out fighting for respect and somewhere along the way started fighting just to fight, forgot why it mattered. Confused dominance with dignity. 99%, 100%, download complete. The door burst open. Security guards rushed in, followed by a man in an expensive suit, chief legal counsel. Mrs. Cross, we received an alert that your server was accessed remotely. He stopped when he saw Jack, saw the open cabinet, saw guilt written in every detail of the scene. Victoria recovered fast, professional mask snapping back into place. A trespasser. He broke into my office and was attempting to steal proprietary data. Arrest him immediately. The guards moved toward Jack. Their hands reached for his arms. Wait! Everyone turned. Hiroshi Tanaka stood in the doorway. Behind him, Dr. Susan Park. Behind her, more members of Crosstech's legal team looking confused and concerned. Hiroshi walked into the office slowly, his 71 years carried with the dignity of someone who'd spent 5 decades building empires and knew exactly when one was crumbling. Everything concerning Crosstech concerns me. I have $75 million invested in this company. That gives me certain rights. He looked at Jack. Mr. Harrison, would you like to explain? Jack's throat was dry. This was the moment. The point where he either committed fully or backed down. Where 3 years of invisibility either ended or extended forever. Mrs. Cross has been falsifying reports, defense contracts with inflated success rates, government projects with hidden failures, financial records that don't match what she's been telling investors. His voice gained strength. The proof is on that server. I was downloading it when she walked in. Victoria laughed, sharp, desperate. He has no proof. He's a disgruntled employee making wild accusations. Jack pointed at the screen. The proof is right there. Everyone looked at the computer, at the flash drive, at the progress bar showing 100% complete. Hiroshi nodded to Dr. Park. Check it. Victoria's voice cracked. Don't touch that. That's private property. You have no right. Section 14.3 of our investment agreement grants me access to any and all financial records upon reasonable suspicion of material misrepresentation. Hiroshi's voice carried absolute authority. Consider this reasonable suspicion. Dr. Park pulled the flash drive from the server, plugged it into her laptop. The room fell silent while she scrolled through files. Her expression shifted, curiosity becoming concern, becoming something approaching horror. Hiroshi, she looked up. You need to see this. For several minutes, the only sound was clicking and scrolling. Jack watched Victoria's face cycle through emotions: defiance, fear, calculation, resignation. She was cornered, and cornered predators either surrendered or attacked. Dr. Park's voice was clinical, stripping emotion from devastating facts. The Nakamura contract. Reported success rate 94%. Actual success rate 61%. 33 percentage points of falsified data. Hiroshi leaned over the laptop. His face remained neutral, but something dark moved behind his eyes. Government defense project. 3 complete failures never reported to oversight agencies. Safety violations that should have triggered immediate shutdown. He turned to Victoria. Is this accurate? Victoria said nothing. Her jaw was clenched. Her hands had stopped shaking. That scared Jack more than the trembling had. She was calculating again, planning her next move. Mrs. Cross, is this accurate? Her voice came out flat. I want my lawyer. Hiroshi nodded to the security guards. Please escort Mrs. Cross to a conference room. She is not to leave the building until our legal team has completed a full review of these documents. The guards hesitated, looking at Victoria for direction. Old habits, old power structures. Hiroshi's single word carried more authority than any of Victoria's threats ever had. Now. They took her arms. Victoria hissed at Jack as they led her toward the door. This isn't over. You have no idea what I can do. No idea who I know. This isn't over. Jack watched her go, felt something like pity mixing with satisfaction. She'd built an empire on fear and manipulation, had crushed anyone who challenged her, but she'd forgotten the most important rule. Empires built on lies eventually collapse under their own weight. The door closed. Hiroshi exhaled slowly, looking every day of his 71 years. Mr. Harrison, I owe you an apology. Jack blinked. For what? For not seeing what was in front of me. I've been investing in companies for 50 years. I pride myself on reading people, understanding character, knowing who to trust. He shook his head. I trusted Victoria Cross, believed her reports, ignored warning signs because the numbers looked good. Hiroshi extended his hand. Jack shook it, feeling calluses that matched his own. You saw what I missed. A janitor with a community college degree saw what a billionaire with 50 years of experience missed. That takes courage and integrity. Our Park closed her laptop. The falsified data extends across at least 7 major contracts. Conservative estimate of financial exposure, 300 million in potential lawsuits, regulatory fines, and contract cancellations. She paused. But the engineering work itself, the actual designs and innovations, those are sound. With proper management, this company could still be salvageable. Hiroshi nodded. Then we'll need new management. He looked at Jack. I don't suppose you'd be interested in a job. The room spun slightly. Exhaustion, adrenaline crash, and whiplash from janitor to job offer in less than 12 hours. You were a janitor. Last night you became the man who saved my $75 million investment. This morning you became the man who exposed fraud that could have destroyed my reputation. Hiroshi's expression softened. I think we can find something more appropriate than pushing a mop. Jack thought about Emma, about promises, about finding his way back to who he used to be before cancer and bankruptcy, and 3 years of invisibility erased the man he'd worked 30 years to become. I don't know what to say. Dr. Park spoke up. Say yes. Hiroshi is offering you a chance to use your gift, to work with engines, with technology, with people who will actually listen to what you have to say. She paused, choosing words carefully. Don't let pride or fear or whatever else is running through your head stop you from accepting what you've earned. Jack looked around Victoria's office, at the locked cabinet, at the private server, at everything she'd built through manipulation and fear, and the absolute conviction that power was the only thing that mattered. Then he thought about his father, Robert Harrison, 34 years at Ford, never promoted, never recognized, who'd been offered 3 times his salary to go to Japan and refused because his son was in Detroit, who died on a garage floor believing his knowledge would disappear with him. I'll take a job, but not as an executive. I don't know how to run departments or manage budgets. Jack met Hiroshi's eyes. What I know is engines. Let me do what I'm good at. Hiroshi looked impressed. What do you propose? Chief engineer. I'll oversee technical work on the Nakamura contract. Let someone else handle management. I'll handle the engines. The title was realistic, achievable, not the kind of leap that would make people question his credentials or whisper about unearned promotions. Chief engineer meant working with his hands, solving problems, doing what he'd spent 30 years learning to do. Hiroshi nodded. Deal. Starting salary $140,000. We'll discuss benefits and long-term compensation later. He extended his hand again. Welcome to Crosstech Industries, Mr. Harrison. Jack shook. His hands were steady now. His breathing had calmed, but inside his heart was pounding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Dr. Park smiled, genuine warmth breaking through a professional reserve. Go home, Jack. Sleep. When you wake up, your life will be different. Jack walked through the building one last time as a janitor. His maintenance cart sat abandoned in the hallway where he'd left it yesterday. Someone else's problem now. Someone else's invisibility. He passed employees arriving for the morning shift. They stared at him. The custodian who'd saved Crosstech, who'd exposed their CEO, who'd changed everything in less than 24 hours. Some looked grateful. Some looked confused. A few looked angry, as if Jack had violated some unspoken rule about knowing your place and staying in it. Jack didn't care. He'd spent 3 years caring what people thought. 3 years making himself small and quiet and invisible so they'd forget he existed. No more. The morning sun hit him like a physical force when he stepped outside. Warm, bright, promising. Jack stood in the parking lot, keys in hand, checking his phone out of habit. 17 missed calls, 42 text messages. His inbox was exploding with job offers, interview requests, journalists wanting his story. The live stream from last night had been viewed 4 million times. Hashtag #CrossTechChallenge was still trending. Jack Harrison, Invisible Man, had become visible to the entire world. He got in his Civic, started the engine. The check engine light glowed its steady accusation. He'd fix that later. Right now, he needed sleep, needed food, needed time to process everything that had happened since Victoria broke a mop over her knee and challenged him to prove he was worth more than his job title suggested. The drive home took 40 minutes. Jack barely remembered it. His apartment looked the same. Secondhand furniture, empty refrigerator, photograph of Emma smiling from a day when they'd both been young and stupid with hope. Except now, the hope didn't feel quite so stupid. Now it felt earned, fought for. Won through courage Jack hadn't known he still possessed. He lay down on the couch, closed his eyes, thought about his father refusing a fortune to stay with his family, about Emma fighting cancer with everything she had, about promises made and kept, and finally, after 3 years, fulfilled. Jack Harrison had found his way back, and tomorrow he'd start building the future his father never got to see. 1 year later, Jack Harrison stood in the center of CrossTech's new Advanced Diagnostics Center and watched his team bring an engine to life. The machine hummed with the smooth rhythm of perfect synchronization, every system aligned, every component speaking the same language. Diagnostic screens glowed green across parameters that had taken 11 months to optimize. Jennifer Hayes called from her station. Thermal stability confirmed, 0 deviation. Jack had found her working the counter at an AutoZone in Columbus, selling parts to mechanics who didn't know half what she knew about engines. 26 years old, high school diploma, a gift for diagnostics that made MIT graduates look clumsy. He'd recruited her with a phone call and a promise that credentials didn't matter more than competence. Darnell Washington's voice carried across the workshop. Harmonic frequency locked at optimal, cooling efficiency 97.8%. Darnell had been driving trucks cross-country, spending his nights at rest stops studying mechanical engineering, textbooks he'd bought secondhand. 42 years old, no college, hands that understood engines the way pianists understood keys. Jack had offered him half his truck driving salary to start, then doubled it after 3 months when Darnell proved he was worth 10 times what CrossTech paid. The Nakamura flagship model represented everything Jack had built in the 12 months. Not just an engine, a philosophy, a proof that talent lived in unexpected places if you bothered to look, that the people society overlooked were often the ones seeing most clearly. Jack nodded to Jennifer. Shut it down. We're ready for delivery. The engine settled into silence. His team erupted in celebration, high fives and relieved laughter from people who'd worked impossible hours to achieve something extraordinary. Jack stepped back, watching them. 1 year ago, most hadn't existed in his world. Jennifer changing oil for minimum wage, Darnell driving I-80 through Nebraska snowstorms, Marcus Chen, no relation to Eric, teaching high school auto shop after every engineering program rejected his applications. Jack had found them all. Convinced Hiroshi and Dr. Park to take chances on people without traditional credentials. Built a team that delivered 37 major projects ahead of schedule, under budget, above specification. CrossTech wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving on principles Victoria Cross would have considered insane. His office sat on the workshop floor, not the 38th floor executive suite Dr. Park had offered. Jack needed proximity to engines, to the heartbeat of machines that still called to him the way they'd called to his father. The desk was cluttered with blueprints and technical manuals. Emma's photograph smiled from its frame beside Robert's picture from 1985, both of them frozen in moments when they'd believed effort mattered more than credentials. Jack's phone buzzed, Dr. Park's name on the screen. He answered, Susan. Her voice carried that particular tone of someone delivering news they weren't sure was good or bad. Victoria Cross was released from prison this morning. The words landed like stones in still water. 12 months. Victoria had served 12 months of a 30-month sentence, early release for good behavior in cooperation with prosecutors. Her testimony had helped build cases against a dozen other executives involved in corporate fraud across multiple companies. Where is she now? Detroit, staying with a cousin while she figures out her next steps. Dr. Park paused. She asked to see you. Jack looked at Emma's photograph. His wife had believed in second chances even when the world proved that faith unwarranted, had believed people could change if given the chance. But she'd also been realistic. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and offering someone a second chance didn't obligate you to accept whatever they did with it. What do you think I should do? That's entirely up to you. She has no power over this company anymore. No influence. No way to harm you or anyone else. If you never want to see her again, no one would blame you. Dr. Park chose her next words carefully. But you're not the kind of man who holds grudges. It's one of the things that makes you good at what you do. You see people as they could be, not as they've been. Jack thought about Jennifer from the auto parts counter, about Darnell from the truck stop, about giving chances to people who wouldn't get them anywhere else. The question was whether Victoria Cross deserved the same generosity, whether someone who'd weaponized power so viciously could actually become someone different. Tell her I'll meet her tomorrow, somewhere public. The coffee shop was busy with morning rush. Jack arrived early, claimed a table near the window, watched people move through ordinary lives. Mothers with strollers, businessmen on phones, teenagers laughing at something on their screens. None of them knew who he was. After a year of media attention and industry recognition, Jack had learned to appreciate moments when he was just another middle-aged man drinking bad coffee. The door opened. Victoria Cross walked in. She looked different, older, thinner. The designer suits were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a worn jacket that had seen better years. No makeup, no jewelry, no visible trace of the woman who'd commanded $1 billion empire with the kind of presence that made rooms fall silent. But her walk still carried purpose. Her eyes still held intelligence. Prison hadn't broken her. Had changed her? Yes, but broken was something different. She spotted Jack, walked toward him slowly, each step testing whether he'd stand up and leave. Jack stayed seated, waited. His father had taught him that silence could be its own form of power. Victoria reached the table. Her voice came out quieter than Jack remembered. "Thank you for meeting me." "Sit down." She sat. Up close, Jack could see lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 12 months ago. Gray streaks in hair she'd always kept perfectly colored. The weight of consequences etched into features that had spent decades hiding vulnerability. "You look good. Successful agrees with you." Jack studied her. The compliment felt genuine but also strategic, as if Victoria was testing which approach might work. "You look tired." Her laugh was dry, brittle. "Prison will do that. Although honestly, the exhaustion started long before they locked me up. I just didn't know how to admit it." She fidgeted with a napkin, tearing small pieces from the corner. A nervous habit completely at odds with the commanding presence she'd projected in her corporate life. Jack recognized it as a sign. Victoria Cross, who'd terrorized 300 employees, was genuinely nervous sitting across from the janitor she'd tried to destroy. "I've been thinking about what I'm going to say to you for 12 months. Rehearsing speeches, preparing arguments, trying to find the perfect words." Victoria looked up at him. "And now that I'm sitting here, none of it seems to matter." Jack waited. Let her find her own way through whatever she'd come to say. "You don't need my explanations. Don't need my excuses. You've moved on. Built something incredible. Helped people I would have dismissed without a second thought." Her expression shifted, bitterness creeping in at the edges. "While I lost everything, the company, the reputation, 12 months in a cell thinking about all the ways I destroyed my own life. The vulnerability lasted only seconds before defensiveness reasserted itself." Victoria's voice hardened slightly. "But you know what? Part of me still thinks I was right. That the world doesn't reward kindness or fairness. That if I hadn't been ruthless, I'd never have built Crosstech in the first place." Jack felt something shift. This wasn't the transformed, repentant Victoria he'd half expected. This was someone still wrestling with who she'd been, still defending choices she intellectually knew were wrong, but emotionally couldn't quite surrender. It was more honest than any prepared speech would have been. More real, and paradoxically, more hopeful, because people who truly changed didn't pretend the change was easy or complete. "What do you want, Victoria?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the shredded napkin in her hands. "Honestly, I don't know. For the first time in my life, I have no plan, no strategy, no goal to chase. I'm 55 years old with a criminal record and no skills beyond exploiting people and manipulating numbers. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm terrified, Jack, more terrified than I've ever been. And I think that might be a good thing, because fear means I'm finally paying attention to consequences instead of just charging ahead and assuming I'm invincible. Jack recognized the fear, had lived with it for 3 years after Emma died, the terror of not knowing who you were when everything you'd built had been stripped away, when the identity you'd constructed over decades collapsed and left you standing in the rubble wondering what came next. What are you going to do now? Victoria's laugh was self-deprecating. I've been applying for jobs. Unsurprisingly, convicted felons with fraud on their records aren't in high demand. My Harvard MBA doesn't mean much when it comes with a criminal background check. She paused, then added with careful casualness, I was hoping maybe Crosstech might have something. Even entry level. I'm not asking for special treatment, just no. The word cut through her sentence like a blade. Victoria flinched. Hurt flashed across her face before she could hide it. Jack leaned forward, his voice firm but not unkind. You need to earn your way back. Not through me. Not through connections. If I hired you now, it wouldn't mean anything. You'd always wonder if it was charity, if you'd actually changed or just found another person to manipulate into giving you what you want. Victoria's eyes filled with tears she was too proud to let fall. So what am I supposed to do? Figure it out, like everyone else does. Apply for TUS, take rejection, keep trying. When you've proven you can work honestly for someone else, work hard without expecting special treatment, then maybe we talk. His tone softened slightly. Emma believed in second chances, but she also believed you earn them, not by asking for them, by proving through actions that you're not the same person who hurt people. Jack stood, placed a $20 bill on the table for his coffee. Good luck, Victoria. He walked out without looking back. The morning sun was bright enough to hurt. Jack got in his Civic. He'd finally fixed the check engine light, a small victory that felt larger than it should. Started the engine, sat with his hands on the wheel, wondering if he'd been too harsh. But Emma's voice in his memory was clear. Some lessons you have to learn yourself. Some changes only happen when there's no easy path left. If Victoria Cross was going to become someone different, she needed to do it without Jack Harrison holding her hand. 6 months passed. Jack didn't hear from Victoria, didn't think about her much. His days were consumed with engine development, team building, the kind of work that filled hours until exhaustion became a friend. The Nakamura contract was complete. 3 other major clients had signed specifically because of Jack's reputation for quality and integrity. Park had become CEO of Crosstech, steering the company through restructuring with the kind of competence Victoria had faked. Hiroshi remained chairman, involved but not interfering, letting capable people do what they did best. Jack was reviewing applications for the William Miller Memorial Fund, a scholarship program he'd established 6 months ago in his father's name. $140,000 of his salary went into it. Hiroshi had matched with $1 million grant. The fund provided full tuition and living expenses for non-traditional students pursuing engineering degrees. 3,000 applications for 50 spots. Mechanics, factory workers, truck drivers, people with passion, but without the pedigree that traditional programs demanded. Each application required essays, recommendations, proof of commitment. No special treatment, no shortcuts, just the chance to prove talent mattered more than credentials. Jack was reading application 2412 when a name made him stop. Victoria Cross. His first instinct was to disqualify her immediately. Second instinct was to read the application before deciding. Third instinct was to check whether she'd received any preferential treatment in the selection process. Dr. Park walked into his office, holding her own copy of the application. You've seen it. Just now. She applied 3 months ago, went through the same evaluation process as everyone else. Same screening criteria, same scoring rubric. Dr. Park sat across from Jack. She was selected because she demonstrated the qualities we look for: humility, willingness to learn, genuine commitment to becoming better. Jack flipped through Victoria's application. The essay was honest to the point of painful. Described 12 months in prison, 6 months working minimum wage at an AutoZone parts counter, enrollment in community college night classes where she'd earned straight A's for 2 semesters, volunteer work teaching basic car maintenance to single mothers at a community center, pro bono, no publicity. The essay's final paragraph hit harder than Jack expected. I spent 30 years climbing. When I reached the top, I had nothing, no family, no real friends, no legacy worth leaving. Prison taught me that real value comes from building, not manipulating. I'll never be the engineer I once pretended to manage, but I can learn to be an honest one. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the chance to prove I can contribute something real. Jack set down the application, looked at Dr. Park. She didn't mention knowing me, didn't use my name anywhere. I noticed that too. She applied as Victoria Cross, former CEO convicted of fraud. Didn't hide it, didn't minimize it, just owned it and moved forward. Jack thought about 89 job applications Victoria must have submitted over 6 months. 87 rejections. Finally landing at AutoZone selling spark plugs and oil filters to mechanics who probably knew she used to run a billion-dollar company. Working that job while taking night classes. Volunteering her time. Building something new from absolute bottom. That was earning it. That was the kind of change Emma would have recognized as real. What's your recommendation? She earned the spot. Question is whether you're comfortable with it. Jack looked at his father's photograph. Robert Harrison had been passed over for promotions he'd earned because people couldn't see past his lack of credentials. Had died unrecognized because the world valued pedigree over competence. The William Miller Memorial Fund existed to prove that wrong. To give chances to people who'd been overlooked or dismissed or judged by their backgrounds instead of their potential. Victoria Cross had been all those things and worse, but she'd also spent 6 months proving she could change, could work honestly, could earn her place without manipulation or shortcuts. If Jack rejected her now, he'd be doing exactly what he'd fought against, judging someone by their past instead of their demonstrated potential. If she earned it, she earned it. Accept her application. 6 months after that, Jack stood at a podium in Crosstech's main auditorium announcing the creation of the Robert Harrison Institute for Engineering Excellence. The room was packed, employees, media, the governor in the front row next to Hiroshi and Dr. Park. This was the moment Jack had been building toward for 18 months. 2 years ago, I stood in this room as a janitor. Most of you didn't know my name. Some of you walked past me every day without ever seeing me. His voice carried through the auditorium, amplified by microphones he'd finally gotten comfortable using. Today, Crosstech is establishing an institute that will ensure no one with talent goes unseen again. The screen behind him illuminated. The Robert Harrison Institute for Engineering Excellence. Mission statement, budget allocation. $100 million over 5 years for scholarships, training programs, apprenticeships. This institute is named after my father, Robert Harrison. 34 years at Ford, could diagnose any engine by sound. Taught me everything I know about listening. Jack's voice thickened. He never received promotion or recognition. Never got the respect his genius deserved because he didn't have a degree or connections or the right pedigree. He steadied himself. My father died believing his knowledge would disappear with him, that the world didn't have room for people like him, people with talent but without credentials, with skill but without status, with genius but without degrees. This institute will prove he was wrong. Jack explained the program. 3,000 applications, 50 fellows selected. Mechanics, truck drivers, factory workers, all with passion for engineering and willingness to learn. All overlooked by traditional systems. All given a chance they wouldn't get anywhere else. The screen changed, showed Victoria Cross's photograph. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Jack let them settle before continuing. I know what you're thinking. How can we welcome back the woman who nearly destroyed us? How can we give this opportunity to someone who hurt so many people? He let the question hang. Then, because that's exactly what this institute is supposed to do. Give chances to people who wouldn't get them anywhere else. Look past credentials and backgrounds and see potential underneath. My father was judged by his background and dismissed despite his brilliance. Victoria Cross will be judged by her background and given a chance despite her failures. Both of them deserve better than being defined by their circumstances. The applause started slow. Built. Within moments, the entire auditorium was standing. Employees who'd watched Jack mop floors were now cheering his vision. Executives who'd dismissed him were applauding his leadership. Cameras captured images that would broadcast around the world. And somewhere in the crowd, Victoria Cross sat with tears streaming down her face, watching the man she'd tried to destroy offer her a chance to become someone new. The Institute's first graduating class walked across the stage 18 months later. 50 fellows who'd completed intensive engineering certification programs. Jack sat in the audience, watching people he'd recruited transform into professionals who'd contribute to industries that had previously rejected them. Victoria's name was called midway through. She walked across the stage in simple black dress, no ceremony, treated exactly like the 49 others, shook Dr. Park's hand, received her certificate. The moment was brief, professional, unremarkable, except for what it represented. A woman who'd once commanded boardrooms now graduating alongside gas station mechanics and truck drivers, all of them equals in achievement. After the ceremony, Victoria found Jack outside. Her voice carried something new, not the desperate fear from the coffee shop, not the defensive anger from prison, but quiet confidence that came from earning something honestly. I got a job offer, small company in Cleveland, design engines for agricultural equipment. Not glamorous, but honest work. Congratulations. I came to say thank you, not just for the scholarship, for everything, for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself, for believing I could change when I didn't believe it. Jack looked at her. Really looked. The woman standing before him had spent 2 years rebuilding herself from absolute bottom, had worked minimum wage, had endured rejection, had proven through actions instead of words that change was possible if you were willing to do the work. You did the hard work. I just maintained standards. Victoria smiled, genuine warmth replacing the predatory calculation that had defined her for 30 years. For 55 years, I chased power and wealth. At the end, I had nothing real, nothing meaningful, nothing that would survive me. She gestured toward the ceremony. But this, what you've built, this will last forever. Every person you teach will teach someone else. Every life you change will change other lives. That's real legacy. Jack thought about his father, about Emma, about the long journey from invisibility to recognition and back to something simpler and more meaningful than either. That's what Emma taught me. The measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. Victoria nodded, extended her hand. Jack shook it, feeling the calluses that hadn't been there 2 years ago. The physical evidence of honest work. Take care of yourself, Victoria. Remember what you learned. I will. She walked toward the parking lot, toward Cleveland and agricultural equipment and a life built on competence instead of manipulation. Jack watched her go, feeling something like pride mixing with relief. Victoria Cross hadn't been saved. Salvation wasn't something one person could give another, but she'd been given a chance to save herself, and she'd taken it. 2 years after Victoria's graduation, Jack announced his retirement from Crosstech. The decision surprised everyone except those who knew him best. At 54, he was at his career's height, respected throughout the industry, wealthy beyond anything he'd imagined, positioned to lead the company for another decade. But Jack was tired, good tired, the exhaustion that came from meaningful work, not the hollow fatigue of invisible labor. He'd accomplished what he'd set out to prove. That talent existed everywhere, that credentials didn't equal competence, that the people society overlooked were often the ones seeing most clearly. Dr. Park asked him the obvious question, "Where will you go?" Jack smiled. "Detroit. There's a garage that's been empty for a long time. I think it's time someone opened it up again." The Robert Harrison Memorial Garage opened on a Saturday morning in September. Nothing fancy, just a simple workshop in an old Detroit neighborhood that had seen better decades. The tools were ones Jack had collected over a lifetime of working with engines. The sign above the door read, "Free engine diagnostics for anyone who needs it." By noon, a line stretched around the block. Single mothers with cars that wouldn't start, Elderly men with trucks that had served them faithfully for 40 years. Teenagers with first cars held together by hope and duct tape. People who couldn't afford mechanics and couldn't understand why their engines had stopped working. Jack helped them all, showed young people how to listen to their engines, taught single parents basic maintenance that could save hundreds in repair bills, passed on his father's wisdom to anyone willing to learn. The same wisdom Robert Harrison had shared in a different garage 40 years earlier. Every engine has a heartbeat. You just have to know how to listen. A young woman walked in one afternoon carrying an engine part, frustration written across her face. I can't figure out what's wrong with it. I've tried everything. Ma, Jack took the part, examined it with hands that had fixed 10,000 problems. Within seconds, he identified the issue, a hairline crack invisible to the untrained eye, causing pressure loss that made the engine run rough. See this? He pointed to the crack. That's your problem. Easy fix if you know what you're looking for. The woman stared. How did you find that so fast? Jack smiled, thinking of his father teaching an 8-year-old boy in a garage that smelled like oil, wine, and possibility. My father taught me a long time ago. He said that machines speak to those who know how to listen. Now I'm teaching you so you can teach someone else. That's how knowledge survives, by being passed on. The woman left with her repaired part and new understanding. Jack watched her go. Behind him, 3 photographs hung on the workshop wall. Robert Harrison in his Ford uniform, looking proud and tired. Emma on their wedding day, smiling like she knew secrets the world had yet to learn. A newspaper clipping from 2 years ago showing a janitor named Jack Harrison announcing an institute that would change thousands of lives. Jack looked at those photographs every day. They reminded him where he'd come from and where he was going and why the journey mattered more than the destination. Late one evening, as Jack was closing up, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Victoria Cross. She looked stronger than the last time he'd seen her, more confident, the kind of confidence that came from earning your place through competence instead of fear. I heard about this place, wanted to see it for myself. Jack gestured around at the tools and equipment and photographs. What do you think? Victoria smiled, real warmth without calculation. I think your father would be proud. That's the idea. She picked up a wrench, tested its weight. I graduated 18 months ago, got promoted twice at the Cleveland company. They're letting me lead a project now. Small team. Agricultural engines. Nothing glamorous, but honest work. Yes, honest work. Victoria set down the wrench. Something I never understood before. The satisfaction of building something real instead of manipulating numbers on screens. She looked at Jack. I came here to say thank you, not just for the scholarship or the second chance, for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself, for believing I could change when no one else did. Jack thought about forgiveness and second chances and the long journey from who we are to who we could become. You did the changing. I just opened a door. What you did with it was entirely up to you. You opened more than a door. Victoria's voice carried weight accumulated over 2 years of honest work. You gave me a chance to become someone I actually want to be. For 55 years, I chased power and wealth and status, climbed over everyone in my path, destroyed people without second thought. At the end, I had nothing. Nothing real, nothing meaningful, nothing that would survive me. She gestured around the garage. But this, what you've built here, this will last forever. Every person you teach will teach someone else. Every life you change will change other lives. That's real legacy. That's what matters. Jack felt the truth of her words settle. This garage would outlive him. The institute would outlive him. The knowledge he'd learned from his father and was now passing to others would outlive them all. That was immortality, not in memory but in impact, not in monuments but in the lives you touched. Emma taught me that. The measure of a person isn't how far they climb, it's how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Victoria nodded slowly. I should go. Early flight tomorrow. New project, new city, new life. Good luck. Thank you. She extended her hand. Jack shook it, feeling calluses that matched his own. Evidence of transformation, written in skin that had once been soft from boardroom comfort. Jack, that night in the boardroom when you fixed the engine, when I tried to destroy you, I've thought about it 1,000 times, wondered what would have happened if you'd just stayed invisible, if you'd kept your head down and let me win. Jack considered the question. I'd still be mopping floors, and you'd still be heading toward that cliff you couldn't see. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing. Not in the moment, but eventually. Victoria's eyes glistened with tears she no longer tried to hide. Then I'm glad you stood up, even if it cost me everything, because it taught me something I never would have learned any other way, that some battles are worth fighting even when you lose, and some victories aren't victories at all. She walked out into the night. Jack watched her go, feeling the weight of 2 years' journey from enemy to something approaching friend. Not quite there yet. Some wounds took longer to heal than others, but moving in the right direction, moving toward a redemption that was earned instead of demanded. Jack turned off the lights, locked the door. Outside, stars burned bright above Detroit, the same stars that had watched over his father's garage decades ago, the same stars that would watch over this garage for years to come. He walked to his car, a newer model now. The Civic finally retired after giving everything it had. Started the engine. No check engine light, no ominous sounds, just the smooth purr of a machine working exactly as it should. Jack thought about Emma's final words, about promises made and kept, about finding his way back when the path seemed impossible. He'd kept all 3 promises, hadn't given up, had remembered who he was, had found his way back to the man his father had trained him to be. And in finding his way back, Jack Harrison had helped hundreds of others find theirs. That was the greatest victory of all, not what he'd built, but what he'd taught others to build for themselves. Not the empire he'd created, but the knowledge he'd shared. Not the recognition he'd received, but the talent he'd helped others discover. Jack drove toward home. The apartment was gone now, traded for a small house in the suburbs with a garage in the back. He'd been fixing it up slowly, new roof, fresh paint, proper lighting, planning to turn it into a workshop where he could teach neighborhood kids the way his father had taught him. The cycle continuing, knowledge passing from generation to generation. Robert Harrison to Jack Harrison to Jennifer Hayes and Darnell Washington and Victoria Cross and 100 others whose names Jack would forget, but whose impact would ripple forward through time. That was immortality. That was legacy. That was what mattered when everything else fell away. Not the money or the titles or the recognition, but the lives you touched and the changes you inspired and the talent you helped unleash in people everyone else had overlooked. Jack pulled into his driveway, turned off the engine, sat for a moment in silence, listening to the tick of cooling metal. The same sound he'd heard in his father's garage 40 years ago. The same sound he'd hear in his own garage 40 years from now, if the universe was kind. Inside, Emma's photograph sat on the mantel. Jack touched the frame gently, feeling wood that had absorbed 2 years of different grief, the kind that came with healing instead of bleeding, with memory instead of absence, with gratitude instead of rage. He'd kept his promises, all 3 of them, and in keeping them, he'd become the kind of man his father would have been proud to know, and his wife would have been proud to love. Jack Harrison, 54 years old, former janitor. Current teacher, forever the son of Robert and Harrison and the husband of Emma Harrison, and the keeper of wisdom that refused to die as long as someone kept passing it forward. The world had finally seen him, and in being seen, he'd helped others become visible too. That was enough. That was everything. That was the legacy that would outlive them all, not buildings or companies or monuments, but the simple truth that talent exists everywhere if you bother to look. And second chances matter if you're willing to earn them. And knowledge survives only when we share it with those who come after. Jack turned off the lights. Tomorrow he'd wake up and return to his garage and teach more people how to listen to engines. The day after that, he'd do it again, and again, and again, until his hands couldn't hold tools anymore and his ears couldn't hear the subtle wrongness that meant something was failing. And even then, the knowledge would survive, because he taught others, and they would teach others, and the cycle would continue long after Jack Harrison was dust and memory. That was the greatest victory a man could achieve, not to be remembered, but to have mattered, not to live forever, but to have helped others live better. Not to climb highest, but to lift most. Jack Harrison had climbed from invisible to visible and back to something better than either. To useful, to valued, to remembered not for what he'd built, but for who he'd helped become. And that was enough.